Imagine a fortune so unbelievably massive that it actually makes today's billionaires look like they're just playing with pocket change. We are talking about a royal empire that literally owned the finest jewels on the entire planet, commanded a massive private army, and bankrolled whole cities. Yet today, it's almost entirely vanished into thin air. Welcome to our explainer. Today, we're unraveling one of the most mind-boggling mysteries in history, the sheer, unfathomable wealth and the sudden, scandalous disappearance of the Raj Darbhanga.
Okay, let's dive right into this. 2,400. That is the number of square miles that the Raj Darbhanga estate covered. To put that into perspective, their private landholdings stretched all the way from the Himalayan foothills right down to the river Ganges. The Rajas of Darbhanga were so insanely wealthy that they actually acted as bankers to other kings. When neighboring royals from Cooch Behar or Alwad ran out of cash, they would literally pledge their family heirlooms to the Raj Darbhanga just to get a loan.
And because they acted as these high-end royal pawnbrokers, their jewel collection was considered even finer than the Nizam of Hyderabad's. I mean, they owned a diamond and pearl necklace that was given as a wedding present to Queen Marie Antoinette. They had the legendary Nalakahar. They possessed the Great Mughal Emerald, which is this massive 217-carat stone beautifully carved with verses from the Quran. Oh, and the 140-carat Peshwa diamond. In fact, here's a super surprising fact for you. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist C.V. Raman actually borrowed that exact Peshwa diamond from the Maharaja for 2 whole days just so he could study its light properties in his lab. That is the sheer, absurd scale of wealth we're dealing with here.
So, Chapter 1. The Forgotten Billionaires. You've got to wonder, how does a family that ruled the Khandwala dynasty for 400 uninterrupted years just lose its grip? For 4 centuries, the Raj Darbhanga acted as absolute rulers. They were the key intermediaries between the British Raj and the local peasants, enjoying just vast wealth and influence. But the turning point hit right in the middle of the 20th century. In 1950, a newly independent India formally abolished the Zamindari system. Practically overnight, the legal framework that allowed them to collect all those immense land revenues was completely wiped out. This forced the family to scramble and adapt to an entirely new socio-political reality, and it really acted as the very first major crack in their 400-year foundation. Now, what's really interesting about Chapter 2 is their legacy as pioneers and philanthropists. See, the Darbhanga royals weren't just hoarding gold in some dark vault. Under Maharaja Lakshmeshwar Singh, this immense wealth was actually funneled into massive public works. Back in 1874, he established the Temple Medical School, which we know today as the highly prestigious Patna Medical College. He donated millions to build miles of roads and iron bridges for his people. And, surprisingly, despite being pretty closely allied with the British, he secretly helped organize and heavily fund the early Indian National Congress conferences in 1892. He was pushing for his countrymen's political rights at great personal risk. But his most impressive feat, it's definitely this. When a severe drought and famine hit North Bihar in 1874, the Maharaja didn't just casually hand out food. He literally raced against time. Using his own personal funds and giving up his own land completely for free, he built an entire railway system to transport relief materials. This Tirhut Railway is widely recognized today as the country's first private train line. It was an incredibly innovative, desperate measure, and it saved countless lives. All right, strap in, because Chapter 3 takes a wildly different turn. The Tantric King. When Lakshmeshwar Singh passed away, his successor took the empire in a highly esoteric, deeply secretive direction. Maharaja Rameshwar Singh wasn't just a king, he was considered a Mahasiddha. I mean, picture this. While managing a multi-million-pound empire by day, his mornings started at 2 a.m., sitting on his bed to read the entire Durga Saptashti. He engaged in intense, highly secretive tantric rituals, and he hosted 108 Brahmins every single night for collective chants. He lived this intense dual life of extreme royal wealth and extreme spiritual discipline. He was so incredibly dedicated to this that in 1908, he organized a massive conference of Tantra scholars. Their goal? To map cosmic energies directly to the human body. He correlated the powerful forms of the divine feminine, the Mahavidyas, to the vital breaths, or the pranas. For example, they charted out exactly how the goddesses Bhairavi and Chinnamasta govern the throat region. He literally transformed his palace into a thriving intellectual hub for ancient spiritual practices that were, at the time, largely hidden from the modern world. Let's move to the mid-20th century and see how this builds into Chapter 4, an industrial empire. Enter the final, immensely wealthy ruler, Maharaja Kameshwar Singh. Kameshwar wasn't just a traditional landlord. He evolved into a modern corporate titan.
He controlled 14 massive businesses across almost every critical sector of the economy you can think of: print media, aviation, huge sugar and jute mills, steel, coal, electricity. This absolute monopoly made him the third richest man in all of India during the 1950s.
These right here were the physical pillars of his empire. He owned Darbhanga Aviation. Actually, think about that. An entire private airline right after independence. He ran two of the leading newspapers of the time, the Indian Nation and Aryavart. He held controlling stakes in the British India Corporation and even owned the super glamorous Walford automobile showroom in Calcutta. This wasn't just old money gathering dust. This was a thriving, diversified, completely modern industrial conglomerate. Honestly, it seemed entirely too big to ever fail. But, of course, empires rarely fall from the outside. Chapter 5. The Great Betrayal. Like I said, they usually crumble from within. And the truly tragic part is that the entire disaster was inadvertently set up by Kameshwar Singh himself. In 1961, following some advice to act as a trustee of his wealth, he created a trust for his estate. But there was a fatal flaw. Of the 3 executors he appointed, 2 were entirely outside of the immediate family. So when the Maharaja tragically died childless just a year later in 1962, these outside trustees were handed the keys to a multi-billion-dollar empire. Meanwhile, his 2 widows were left on mere monthly pensions of just a few thousand rupees.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is just how suspiciously fast these trustees moved. Within just 1 month of the Maharaja's death, they literally gave away 2 airplanes. By January 1963, they donated an unbelievable 600 kilograms of gold to the government. Over the next year, they rapidly sold off prime estate lands and the palatial Calcutta Darbhanga house. Now, they claimed they needed the cash to pay massive death duties or taxes. But, well, the bleeding didn't stop there.
Experts actually call this era the Great Jewel Heist of 1967. Remember all those priceless jewels we talked about earlier? The Marie Antoinette necklace, the Peshwa diamond, the Nolaka har? A European firm officially valued them at £20 million. But the trustees quietly sold the entire lot to a Bombay jeweler named Nanubai Javari for a paltry 70 to 75 lakh rupees. That is literally pennies on the dollar. The family's greatest, most historic treasures were just gone in a flash, and the widows weren't even consulted.
And beyond the actions of the trustees, the estate's holdings were further diminished through official government channels. Based on the historical source documentation during the 1970s, including the period of the emergency, the state government undertook a series of systematic acquisitions. In 1975, the main Raj Darbhanga office was acquired. Prime City land and the sprawling Nargona Palace soon followed. Through the 1980s, the state also formally acquired the estate's massive sugar, jute, and paper mills, most of which, the records show, were subsequently shut down shortly after those acquisitions took place. So if you go looking for the physical legacy of this absolute powerhouse today, here's what you're going to find. The Grand Nargona Palace is now a university campus. The Darbhanga House in Patna serves as a university department, while their prime real estate in Delhi houses government intelligence offices. The factories, the mills, the private airlines, the very engines of their wealth are completely silent. The infrastructure that once powered all of North Bihar has essentially been entirely erased. And here is the absolute most tragic irony of the whole thing. The plunder hasn't even stopped. Fast forward to January 2024, and an FIR was filed revealing that the absolute last scraps of the family's wealth, 4 kilos of gold and 30 kilos of silver belonging to the estate's Temple Trust, were allegedly melted down and quietly sold off by the trust's current attorney. The surviving heirs are literally still fighting police cases over the melted remnants of an empire that once rivaled small countries in its net worth. Which leaves us with this final, honestly haunting question. What we've witnessed today is the systematic, piece-by-piece dismantling of a massive legacy. From acting as bankers to kings, building private railways to save the starving, and deciphering the cosmos, to fighting in court over melted temple silver. It really reminds us that no matter how vast the wealth, without proper safeguards, a lifetime of building can be completely unraveled in a single generation. Think about the institutions and legacies in your own community right now. When the guardians become the looters, who preserves the past?